couple days ago, Bryan Reynolds of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And really, I was in Pittsburgh in September for the Blue Jays series there. Not a lot of fan support. There's not a lot of reasons to go out and watch Pittsburgh Pirates baseball at this moment. Bryan Reynolds is one of the few. Him and O'Neill Cruz basically are the reason fans are showing up at that stadium. But then he came out 2 days ago and said that he wanted a trade. Now, of course, this is a dude Blue Jays fans have salivated over since the realization we needed a center fielder. That since we decided, and by we, I mean, obviously the front office, but Jays fans seem pretty on board with moving George Springer from center field, a very taxing position on a body of his size and an age of 33, to right field. And that seems to be, it's tough to judge what this Jays team is doing because we have literally heard almost nothing. But it seems like with the move of Teoscar Hernandez, this is part of the plan. Now, Adam, Bryan Reynolds, statistically, offensively, would be excellent.
Yeah, I mean, we got the tweet here from Danny Vetti. Bryan Reynolds ranks among qualified NL center fielders in 22. First in OPS, first in home runs, first in slugging percentage, first in average exit velocity, second in extra base hits, second in total bases, second in weighted runs created plus, WOBA, and WAR.
See, he's one of the best center fielders offensively in the league. Now, yes, a lot has been made out of his defensive face plant, I guess is the best way of putting it in 2022, because this is what's really weird about Bryan Reynolds is that he really was a good center fielder. His outs above average were good to elite in every year but last year, and then it was just plain bad with a -7. Now, we've talked about this before, the advanced defensive stats. They're not perfect. And we saw it with Matt Chapman this year.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Chapman, according to these stats, were considered a below average third baseman. Anyone with eyes in Blue Jays land knows darn well that wasn't the case. But there is still something to be said for these stats. And it was really interesting, too, because with left batters, his outs above average was actually +1. So almost all of his negative outs above average that occurred was with right-handed batters. And that makes you wonder if it was the positioning the Pirates were playing with that caused part of this. Sometimes it's bad luck. And I know that stats, according to Fangraphs, he was one of the more unlucky center fielders this year, whatever that means.
You know what? Honestly, everything to do with the Pittsburgh Pirates is a bit of a write-off defensively. I mean, we watched that.
Great point, by the way.
The third baseman was pulling spits out of his back pocket while the play was happening. You remember that hilarious play? If I was a better producer, I'd pull up the video of this right now. But there's a guy rounding third, and he's pulling spits out of his back pocket for him out. Like, that's the kind of team atmosphere that was going on in Pittsburgh this year. So,
yeah, it's not like the Pirates were overly engaged in the games, especially after about June when they were already mathematically eliminated from the playoffs.
So I'm not going to read too much into that. I mean, if historically he's good and last year not so good, it's not a concern for me.
This is news that did pique every Blue Jays fan's interest for numerous reasons, and we just kind of went over it. Just the fact it looks like George is probably moving to right field, the Jays' need for a center fielder or someone who can log some serious time there, the need of a lefty bat, which Bryan Reynolds is. David Bednar is a big bullpen piece that interests a lot of Blue Jays fans and should and would fit into this bullpen really nicely. So you dream of this big trade that would fill several needs within this Blue Jays organization. But here's the thing. The Pittsburgh Pirates are a joke organization. And if you think Bryan Reynolds asking for a trade is going to move the needle on this front office in Pittsburgh at all. It's laughable. 3 years of control they have this guy at a very, very reasonable rate. He's just ARB eligible this year. I don't know, man. I don't think it's happening. I don't think he's going anywhere. There are a lot of other teams that have supposedly said that they're interested, and why wouldn't you when we just went over his offensive numbers. Anyone who's in need of a center fielder, and even forget that, a left-handed bat in the outfield is going to be interested in this guy.
All right. I want to agree with you, but at the same time, we're just about to talk the Sean Murphy Oakland Athletics situation. I don't see the difference. The Athletics are a joke organization as well. 3 years of control left on Sean Murphy.
Yeah.
For me, it's a very equivalent situation. I think
except for the fact that Billy Beane and the front office in Oakland is a lot better at what they do.
All right.
Than the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's my only argument, but I agree with you 100%. If you're just taking a zoomed out look at it, at the landscape, you would think that they're in the exact same position.
So you think that the Pirates' sheer incompetence is going to stand in the way of Bryan Reynolds getting moved?
Do you think, Adam, Bryan Reynolds coming out and asking for a trade lowers the Pirates' leverage at all?
No.
If they are, I don't think so either. At first I did. At first I was like, wow, Bryan Reynolds is really screwing the Pirates over. But then the more you think about it, the more you're like, the Pirates don't even have to move him. Like, you can request the trade all day long. Like, Bryan Reynolds was already probably miserable in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, like that's kind of where I come down is I'm over reading into a team having leverage or not.
Yeah.
Like, he's got 3 years left. It's not like it's a walk year where he's like, I'm going to sit out this season. Like, he's not sitting out for 3 freaking seasons. Right? So, yeah, they don't have to move him. He's going to hurt himself more than anything if he starts eating spits mid-play. Bryan Reynolds is going to have to play his face off for his own contract's sake. Yeah, I don't think there's a leverage situation. I think that the Pirates should move him. I think anybody who was interested before is just maybe more interested now.
I would have to agree with that. And I think Jays fans maybe need to cool their jets a little bit because there is some major interest in Reynolds. And the Pittsburgh Pirates have 2 very viable young catching prospects coming up the ranks right now. Now, the Blue Jays' biggest area of strength, and we've talked about this frickin' ad nauseum, right? Like, we bring this up every time we hit record, is most likely a catching trade that's going to bolster any area of need the Blue Jays do through trade. Not necessarily. I'm not saying the Blue Jays can't get a deal done without including a catcher. I think they would be able to pull it off. However, are they prepared to move a Ricky Tiedemann? I don't think they are. So if you're going to try and get a Bryan Reynolds with prospects, I don't know if it's doable. Now, maybe you can put in a Santiago Espinal, but even how much value does Espinal have outside of the fact he plays a good second base, defensively, is an average hitter, and would fit in really nicely and affordably in that Pirates? Like, there is value there. I'm not saying there's not value, but you know what I mean, right? He's not Bryan Reynolds.
I'm just having a hard time understanding the direction of the Pittsburgh Pirates, where they want to go. And that's got to be frustrating as a Pittsburgh fan.
Yes.
But no, I think as it stands right now, I don't know if anybody was calling Pittsburgh inquiring about Bryan Reynolds before this.
Especially after they came out and said they have no interest in moving him, right? Like, there was interest in Reynolds, I think, at the trade deadline last year, but Sherrington made it very clear that he wasn't interested in moving on from Bryan Reynolds unless he was completely blown away. And I think he held firm on that. And I think it just got around other organizations. And now you're right. Reynolds comes out and requests a trade. All of a sudden that phone's going off the hook again, right?
So yeah, I would say as far as leverage goes, it's it's a buyer's market, not a buyer's market. It's supply and demand, right?
Yes.
Affects the value, and if nobody thought Reynolds was available, then the demand would be zero.
Yes.
All of a sudden, everybody knows that he's available, or at least self-imposed requests to be available. So there's going to be 10 plus teams now who are calling up or meeting and rubbing elbows at the water cooler on Bryan Reynolds. So I would say the value's going up as far as the trade goes. I think that's good for Pittsburgh, but I don't know what they want in return. I would say probably prospects, something cheap that they can put on the field that fans are going to be somewhat excited about.
I am so grateful to be a Toronto Blue Jays fan when you look at the mess the Pirates are in. And I know that was one thing that really stood out. I had a blast in Pittsburgh, and most Blue Jays fans did. And we really did commandeer that PNC Park when that Blue Jays series happened. It was 50-50. And by far, I mean, all the Canadians were there on a weekend vacation, right? So it was a much louder crowd for the Jays because everyone was drunk and having a good time and they were winning, right? But man, Pirates fans, that was one thing that really stood out to me. And I can't think of a better word than downtrodden. Just no hope. They had no hope in their management. They had no hope in their ownership. They just didn't feel like this team, no matter what's going on. And I know I was talking with one gentleman who brought up O'Neill Cruz and was like, he's like, I don't even have faith that they're going to be able to develop him properly. So the fans have no faith in their development ability, no faith in their ability to keep players, no faith in the front office. Like, man, no wonders that stadium's empty.
O'Neill Cruz is going to be a freak athlete in this sport. I'm not worried about his development. I would be frustrated as a Pirates fan that they are not going to put any sort of competitive team around him, and that they are going to squander his years until he goes. Just frustrating for sure. But I mean, honestly, if O'Neill Cruz came out tomorrow and said, I would like to be traded too, please, like, package me and Reynolds together, I wouldn't be surprised. But that's a rough
really
spot
too
to
bad.
be in.
We'll move on here. We don't want to talk how terrible the Pirates are too much here, but it is too bad that this is the position they're in because it's a beautiful park, and Pittsburgh is a surprisingly pretty city. The park is right in the downtown on the river. Like, the market could boom there, but they're just going about it all wrong. You know, it's what happens when you penny pinch for decades. We really appreciate all of you within the walk-off community. This thing continues to grow and become an animal of its own. It's a little bit overwhelming, but honestly, we love talking Blue Jays baseball and all the interaction that you folks are involved with us. Thank you so much. Discord, feel free to join it. That is always free. The show, or the link is in the show notes. You can follow us on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast, on Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube currently and you're not subscribed, we'd really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. All the best, everybody. Cheers.